In this episode, I talk about some of the aha moments that I've had in the past week around the illusion of fear and how we can trust ourselves more deeply and experience more freedom in our expression. Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, flower alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI. And I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge. Welcome to the Flowerlounge Podcast. This is Katie Hess, and I've been wanting to record a podcast for a while now about fear. It's such a popular topic, I know, but actually it's had some real aha moments this month about fear and about self-trust, and I wanted to share with you. So if you've been listening to any of my content in the last month, you will know that my personal belief is that over the last month or so, or several months, especially if you live in Asia, we have been going through a time, I believe, where we are purging fears, purifying fears. It started with the virus, people being afraid of getting sick, afraid of getting others sick, afraid of loved ones dying, afraid of this big bad ugly plague. And if you have not been afraid, which I'm one of those weirdos since the beginning, I haven't been afraid in that kind of situation at all. But I have noticed that other fears have arisen. I had this moment where I was really afraid of one of my dogs dying unexpectedly. I have become acutely aware of impermanence and the fact that the people around me that I love will eventually die and that I will die. So it's like a death practice in a sense. What a lot of Buddhist monks recommend that we do in order to know how to fully live our lives is to reflect on the inevitability of our own death and of the death of our loved ones. And I really wholeheartedly believe in that type of practice. I think it really, really works. But if it hasn't been about, fears of dying, it can also be about fears of being left out or left behind, or of self-doubt. It could be super subtle fears that hold you back from your fullest expression. Like, I know I went through a time period where there were a few emails we sent out and we got one or two people that complained pretty harshly. It was during the time when everybody was really amped up and full of a lot of fear at the very beginning of the lockdowns in the United States. And so folks were super amped up emotionally. And it was the first time that I'd ever received any real negative feedback. And so then there was that fear of speaking up, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of being criticized, fear of being publicly humiliated, or people misunderstanding my intentions or misunderstanding where I'm coming from as a human being. And there are so many different types of fears that we all have. And regardless of whatever is happening in this sort of solid reality, in a more subtle, energetic reality, I do believe that people are purging fears, or that we have gone through this squeeze tunnel of purifying a lot of funky patterns and old things that were stuck. We've been forced. I've been working really hard during the last month because our business has been essential, but for those who have been at home, and even those of us who are working, when we're home, we're not doing anything, or we're not going anywhere. We're not going out to eat and doing things, obviously. So all of us have been spending extra time with ourselves and our realities and what we create and the life that we've created and the choices that we've made and the choices that we will make. Being forced to look at how we want to live our lives, when things really ramp up here soon and business goes back to usual, what are those ways of being that we want to bring back into our everyday lives? Also, last week, I had to run an errand, and I had this almost kind of near-death experience. I wrote about it on my personal Instagram page, and I was so interesting because I pulled off the freeway and I went down an exit ramp and I was stopped. You know how to turn under the bridge, you're stopped and you're just waiting for the turning light to change. I was sitting in my car. I had both hands on the wheel. it wasn't moving. It's like, it's not even one of those instances where you could say like, oh, that was like a lesson for you to pay more attention and be more aware. Because in the moment I was totally aware that this truck, like a big SUV type truck, came hurling off the freeway at least or more than 100 miles per hour to the left of me down the gravel median. So like that gravel area between the freeway and the actual street. And in that moment, I could see it coming toward me. Like it was going to hit me right in the side. So I immediately pulled to the right as far as I could. And then I thought, oh, wait, but don't go too far forward, because if it doesn't hit me, he's going to hit the one in front of me. It's just going to be this huge crash pile up. And it all happened so fast. And in the end, it was a freaking miracle. No one got hurt. It was one of those experiences where, afterwards, it's like there is no doubt in my mind that there are protectors at work, and damn, they work hard. And thank you so much gratitude, because it literally was just a miracle that no one got hurt. So the truck was inches from my door, and it was going so fast, and it ran into two huge metal, 15-foot high signs, just like T-bone, just like bam, hit them. And it was, I don't know if the person was either drunk or unconscious or passed out or something, because the brakes didn't even go on until he hit the signs. So this whole 100-mile-an-hour down the gravel, down the median, towards the cars, the brakes didn't even get put on until he hit the signs real hard. Hit the signs so hard, these metal welded signs ripped out of their bases and flew all the way across 3 lanes to the other side for the entrance ramp on the freeway. And he slammed on the brakes, slam, and then ended up in the middle of the intersection. And was like, in that moment, I realized something. I've had other moments like that in my life where something happens really quickly, and I realized you don't have time to be afraid in those moments. Like, a lot of people on Instagram are like, oh my God, that's so scary. That's so terrifying. And the reality of it is, in that moment, it wasn't scary at all. Zero, nothing, fear wasn't present. It was pure illumination, awareness, clarity state, absolute, boom, sunshine, and knowing action, right? Move over, do this, do that. And also the inevitability of there is no control. So in this moment, the best, you do what you can, you act immediately, and then you wait and you see what happens. There is no time to be afraid. I am 500% sure that had that truck hit my car, it would have been fatal. I wouldn't be here. And that I was acutely aware of that in that moment. And yet, like I said, there's no time for fear. And so afterwards, then the adrenaline, right? Everything, the body is freaking out afterwards. But from that experience, I had this aha moment, and I realized that fear is more like an appearance. It's like an illusory appearance. It's not something that is actually solid. When I was collecting the crown flower, I had that same sensation that fear is this strange phenomenon that grips our minds and our bodies. And it's more like fear of fear itself. It's like fear of the unknown, fear of what might happen. It's actually not being in the present moment. Fear can only be present when we're not present, right? So fear is only when we are somehow in anticipation with a level of tension around what is coming next. It's like we're in the future, in a worst possible future. It's like the anticipation of something that isn't real yet. That's why I say it's an illusory appearance. It's like when you're a kid and you're afraid of the monsters under the bed, or that are following you up the stairs as you run up the stairs, or being afraid of the dark, right? It's unknown, or being afraid of whatever, all the different kinds of things that we're afraid of. being afraid of abandonment, of loneliness, of dying alone, of spiders. It's like we all have our favorite flavors of fears, and they can be super subtle. Like I said before, they can just be like a niggling little hesitation or self-doubt. It can be like when you post something on Instagram or Facebook and then you're like, ooh, should I post that? Or TikTok. Like, I really feel like, and then you're like, oh gosh, should I really posted that? It can be that level of self-editing that is also in the category of fear. It's like anticipation of something that's not real. I was reminded of that kind of near-death experience that I've had other kind of similar experiences in life where it was that same sensation of just like, poof, awake. I was telling one of my best friends about it, and she said, yeah, that's exactly what it felt like when my dad was dying, because her dad, who was in his 90s, recently died. Beautiful, peaceful death. But she was saying that in those last hours with him, it was the same sensation of there is no capacity for fear or sadness because you're so 100% in the moment. It's like, what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? Like you're hanging on the edge of the moment. And you're just right there, right there, right there. And I remember that same sensation when my dearest, dearest, sweet dog Joy died. And when I was with her in those last days and hours and minutes and seconds, that there was a little bit at times like anxiety, but it was more like clinging and attachment while trying not to cling and grasp. But in the actual moment of those last breaths, it was like I was so suspended in the present moment, like so 100% present with her, that there was nothing, there was no room for anything else but pure presence and awareness. And so I ask myself, what is it that prevents us from being in the present moment fully 100% every moment, right? And I remember one of my teachers from Tibet encouraging us to practice as many times as we could during the day to come into the present moment with a variety of different meditation methods that we'd been taught. And when I was having my experience collecting the crown flower this month, it was like this incredible wave of powerful, spacious, neutral, equipoise, freedom, calm in the face of like your worst nightmare. It's like the flower was able, or the plant was able to show me the balanced state and the capacity that we have as human beings to be fully free in the sense of spaciously aware and calm in the face of our absolute worst nightmare. And it's really just, I think it comes back to, again, an encouragement for us to do the practices of not only flower essences, but also meditation or mindful awareness practices. Whether it's awareness anchors, whether it's focusing on our breath, whether it's relaxing our muscles, whether it's noticing the sounds or the temperature or what we see around us, whatever are those methods that we employ to bring ourselves back into the present moment, are so incredibly powerful because we are training our minds to enter a new habitual state, habitual pattern. And it takes quite a lot of repetition to be able to maintain that state 24/7. And then in the last week, I thought, I went from like being afraid that my loved ones were dying or thinking about them dying and what I would do with them not being here, or to a little more subtle fears in the consecutive weeks. Fears of being left out, being not acknowledged, of being misunderstood, of being criticized, of being roasted publicly. And then as I worked with the crown flower and then just really tried to work with whatever was arising during this time period, the fears became more subtle. So in the past week, it looked more like self-doubt, right? Those really secret fears that are like the example of when you post something on social media and then you go, oh, should I have done that? Like, is that of value? Like, does that serve anyone? Is this just too much about me? Like, these are the little thoughts that go through my head. That level of hesitation, this is so subtle, right? And I thought, man, I want to eradicate those last, like even secret fears of self-doubt, because I want to be fully free. And that's the week that the almost accident happened. Sort of near death, facing my own mortality without preparation, like a very, very facing a potential very, 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 very speedy death. And I remember thinking to myself earlier last week that in terms of eradicating self-doubt and being able to 5,000% trust myself no matter what decision I make or how I am in the world or what I say, that trusting myself is not knowing that everything will turn out okay. It's actually knowing that I'll be able to work with whatever arises, even in the not okayness. Then that near accident happened. And the next day I was like, why do things like that happen, right? Like, I totally get it if I was like on my cell phone or texting or not paying attention or doing something stupid or in conversation, like I would have understood it better in terms of like, well, that was a warning that you should be aware. But in that moment, I was fully aware and could see it coming. And so the next morning I was doing a jog around the neighborhood, asking myself, like, why did those things happen? And I've actually had several of those kinds of experiences in differing degrees, thinking like, have I done something wrong? Like, why did those experiences happen? I mean, I'm fine and I'm super grateful and I couldn't be more like revitalized to be alive. But why do those things happen? And I thought, I'm going to just sit with this for like the whole week and just see what arises. I do this practice that I call contemplation, which is not like actively thinking about it, trying to figure it out. It's actually just like almost like a Zen koan. So like having a question and then just like letting that question marinate or percolate in the background and seeing what arises throughout the week. So I figured I would sit with it all week, but then boom, something just jumped in my mind. And that was, if you trust yourself in death, right? So like if I trust myself 500% in death, which I have that experience of being totally calm, clear, lucid, awake, that pure awake awareness state when facing death, why wouldn't you trust yourself in every single little thing you do and say in life? If I trust myself in facing death and throughout the whole death process of myself dying, why wouldn't I trust myself in even the most minute, tiny secret thing in my life? And those felt like big aha moments for me. So I just thought I would share in case you are working through levels of fear or working through levels of self-doubt or trust or aiming or wanting to devote or commit yourself to experiencing more freedom and being able to express more of who you are. I know me personally, I think that self-doubt prevents so many more layers of self-expression. And that's what I want to liberate, right? I want to liberate that. I want to feel free to express, free to be myself, to speak, to do, and never think to myself like, ooh, was that the right thing? Should I, right? I think you can probably relate. If there were none of that, if we eradicated all of that, that would be an incredible freedom. Self-doubt is exhausting. And I think that self-doubt is like a very subtle form of fear, which is, in essence, not being in the present moment. That was that other aha that I had. It was like, oh my God, fear can only be present when we are not in the present moment, right? Am I right? Think about that for a minute. Fear can only be present in our system when we are not in the present moment, or when there is a part of us that is in the future, worried about the unknown, or worried about what will happen if, what if. Or we may be in the past, some experience that we had when we were a child, and we're afraid of re-experiencing that. We're afraid of being abandoned or left behind, or not belonging, or not receiving the attention or love, or not being lovable, or XYZ. So we're either in the past referencing something from the past that was painful, or in the future. So the answer to eradicating our fears and eradicating whatever prevents us from our greatest self-expression and our greatest capacity to love and to be of service and to awaken and to dissolve self-doubts and experience a greater level of freedom and trust and wild, uninhibited nature, is about allowing ourselves to rest in the present moment. And the more that we can employ those methods of relaxing into our bodies, noticing what we're feeling, so often it's just so subtle, we're avoiding, right? Like, let me just have this cup of coffee or tea or chocolate or yummy thing, or let me just distract with this other thing, which are okay too. But as often as possible, encouraging ourselves to come into the present moment. If you, like me, are really feeling a strong sense of devotion and commitment to experiencing more freedom, and as the world goes back to sort of cranking at a faster pace as it previously has, if you are wanting to bring forward gifts from this time, I would say one really helpful way of accelerating the growth would be to work with the crown flower elixir, or any flower elixirs for that matter, but the crown flower specifically is for really diving deep into eradicating fears from great, like your worst nightmare, to very, very subtle and sneaky and teeny tiny secret fears. So I can't encourage you enough to work with the crown flower elixir and to employ methods of mindful awareness as often as you can during the day, as many times as you can remember, to encourage yourself to notice when your mind is spinning out and bring yourself into the present moment, to commit to a meditation practice, even if it's just 5 minutes in the morning. Those 5 minutes in the morning will sustain you throughout the rest of the day and will begin to add up. It's like putting money in the bank with interest, with a lot of interest, right? Those 5 minutes add up. And suddenly you feel your life changing. Or if you're interested in doing the 4:15 a.m. practice that I do and that many of us do here at LOTUSWEI, there's information about that on our blog. That is a particularly powerful time to be doing 5-minute meditation practices. So what do you think? Do you feel that during the last month or 6 weeks or so, have you noticed differing levels of fear arise? And I want to say too, something that I shared in a video about the crown flower is that it's so nourishing to give yourself the capacity to be with your fears. Be with your fears. And I think that's what so many people during this time have done, is just be with whatever is arising, to be with themselves, to be with their lives as they've created them, to be with whatever things arise from just having more time at home. Again, I remember one of the girls on my team said, I can't go to concerts, I can't go out. This has forced me to look at things that I haven't wanted to look at for years. And it's so important to softly allow ourselves to be with all of those things, that there is nothing we have to let go of or eradicate. And when I say eradicate in terms of eradicating fears and self-doubts, I don't mean like cut them out or force them out or let them go, or it's more like being with. And when we're able to be with our fears and feel the kind of yuck of that feeling, they transform. Just observing and looking at them and being with them gently already starts to transform them. They start to move through our bodies and psyches in a different way, and over time will fully dissolve, as long as we can allow ourselves this practice of continually being with whatever arises. Something else I mentioned in the crown flower video was that one of my teachers, who is Tibetan, a very dear teacher, when after he finished his the equivalent of a PhD in Buddhist philosophy, he went to do the real hardcore practice, and he did a 3-year solitary retreat in a cave, which is customary for that tradition, which is, for us Westerners, that's already super wild. To imagine that for 3 years of your life, you will not talk to anyone else, you will not see anyone else, you will not have a cell phone, you will not FaceTime anyone, that you will just be 100% solitary by yourself doing meditation practice for 3 years. And he shared with me this experience that he had nearing the end or middle of his retreat, when he felt all of the walls of his cave in on top of him. It was like this incredibly scary, traumatic experience when the cave was, everything was caving in on him. And he told me that actually it was just an appearance. It was like a hallucination. It didn't actually happen in the solid realm. In those retreats are designed to really bring up any sort of latent subconscious stuff stuck, right? And the walls actually did not cave in on him. He's alive and well. And that was just fascinating to me, that his psyche could actually create that hallucination, essentially, in order to give him the opportunity to remain in calm equipoise no matter what. No matter if the walls are crashing in on you, just staying in that calm observation, being with whatever arises state. That's powerful. Powerful, powerful practices. And these are practices that, you can do in the cave when you're on your 3-year solitary retreat, and you can do when you're out here in normal life as a lay person, running a business, having a job, having children, running a household. By oneself, one attains. And any tiny, minute bit of effort that we put in, we will reap the benefits. I can tell you from my experience of doing practices, mindful awareness practices, and working with flower essences, that over time you see such a huge difference, that the effort you put in, you get back 1,000-fold, millionfold. So thank you for joining me on the Flowerlounge podcast, and thank you for being a part of our community, working with flower essences, and devoting and committing yourself to mindful awareness practices, and ultimately your own awakening. Your awakening helps our awakening, and I want to thank you for any effort you put towards that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them, and don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at LOTUSWEI.com.